Welcome to episode 184 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat GDPR, data, CRM and sponsorships with Fiona Green.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is standing by for your tweetage. Yes, that's a word he made up, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and I do appreciate your tweetage, sending in the tweets. And you can do that by tweeting at SportsGeek or at Sean Callanan. I really do get a buzz when I see, especially a new listener, and the old listeners, if you've been listening for a while, thank you very much. But if you tweet that you've listened to an episode, enjoyed an episode, or tweet with the guests, really do appreciate it. So yes, I do use the word tweetage. As always, you can contact me on platforms like Twitter, or you can do it the old-fashioned way. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. And I've been really enjoying getting in touch with a few listeners and starting a few projects with people who are listeners. So if you're one of them thinking, how can I help my team? How can I drive more revenue from digital? How can I better get cheeks in the seats? They're the projects that we like getting our teeth into, and we like building success stories for people who listen to the podcast. So please get in touch either at Sean Callanan on most platforms, or simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/chat with Sean and book in a time and we can have a chat about it. One thing that is funny, catching up with a few people who do listen to the podcast, is that some people listen at double speed, and so when they meet me in real life, I talk a little bit slower than they used to. So I'm more than happy, just to tell me that you listen on double speed, and I'll have a few coffees beforehand. This week I caught up with Fiona Green, a good friend of mine based in the UK. She is my go-to person when I want to talk about data and CRM, and it was one of the things that sort of came out, or that I came away from, one of the takeaways from my European trip, was the incoming data protection rules, GDPR as it's known, coming in May, and some of the fear and some of the theories about what's going to happen when it does come in. Is it all to be believed? Is it something to be worried about? What do you need to do to get ready for it? And so I thought Fiona would be a great person to talk about that, because that's what she does with her business, Winners. So we chat about that, and then also some of the stuff that she does around data and good data governance, and how it can help build a better sponsorship picture and help you secure sponsors. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Fiona Green from Winners. Very happy to welcome back good friend of mine all the way from the UK, Fiona Green from Winners. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me back. My goodness me, I don't even know how many years it's been.
Oh, it's
definitely 2 or 3.
It's been a while since you've been on the podcast, but thankfully we do catch up every now and again at conferences around the world, usually at SEAT. But I wanted to, or the reason other than wishing you a happy new year at the start of the year, the reason I sort of sent you an email just recently was in my trip to Europe and talking to a few people behind the scenes in the sports space. One thing that kept coming up was the incoming GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulations, coming in around data protection and privacy around the European Union. So there was a real mixed reaction of some people being completely scared, some people being blasé, and trying to understand how all the rules operate. And so that's why I thought Fiona is my person. Fiona will know this from start to end, because it is the space that you're in. So first of all, just for the listeners, the European listeners will know about the incoming rules that are coming in. It's in May, isn't it?
May 25th,
May 25th. So they'll know about it, but people in the US and Australia might not know about it, and they probably have similar things in their country. Do you want to give us a brief rundown of what GDPR is?
Yeah, and firstly, to your point about speaking to different people in Europe, some being blasé, some being on massive panic attacks, even within our client base, we have exactly the same attitude.
Yep.
So I do understand that. So basically, it's a shape up of the EU Data Directive. Here in the UK, it was called the Data Protection Act. The purpose of it is to improve the rights of the public or the data subjects, the individuals. It's to protect them, basically. And there are a number of implications. I'll make it really simple. When you ask somebody to fill in a form to give their details, whether they're buying something from you or participating in something or just want some news from you, you've got to ask them for a clear and express opt-in. That's the biggest thing that we're going to see most visibly. So instead of just saying, yes, I want a newsletter or I want to hear from you, we've got to put in a bit of a chunkier piece of wording. Things like the previous soft opt-in, where you could use people's data if you received it in the process of a transaction, or an implied opt-in. They've all gone. It has to be clear and express. So that's at the front end.
So that's the first thing around making it. It's really user and personal based, isn't it? It's not for the company. It's like making it easier for. I mean, they ran through similar things here in Australia around privacy policy statements were getting more complex. They were getting more legal, and the everyday person couldn't understand them. And so they said, if the normal person can't understand them, it's too complex. But the main thing is around opt-ins, and people will know when they sign up what they're signing up for.
Yeah, so that's the main consumer-facing thing. That's the thing you'll see most at the front end. So what you're signing up for, how are people using your data, and the cookie policy and your terms and conditions and privacy policy on your website are all part of that. But most people don't go any deeper than just the opt-in tick box.
Yep.
So that's the thing most people will see. Once you're in someone's database, the individual then has additional rights. We've always had the right to unsubscribe, in effect, but that's been taken even further. You've got the right to be forgotten. You've got the right to inquire. Here's an interesting one, the right to portability. Now, this is a really interesting one because you have your data has to be held in such a manner that it can be easily transported to another party. It doesn't mean that, for example, if I sign up with Spotify, I've got to say, hey, Sean, I want to be a member of Spotify. Can you send my data over to them so I don't have to go through the login process? But it does mean that if Spotify come to you and say, hey, Sean, you've got Fiona Green's data and I want it, I need to come and get it. And you've got to let them come and get it.
Yep.
In other words, you've got to store it in a manner that can be easily accessible and it can be open. And I've worked in the past with organizations when we try and get into their database. It's been written in a program where the data's, you can't get to it. You've got no access. And of course, the provider, the supplier, was onto a sure thing.
Yep.
He'd tightly locked in the data. He couldn't be replaced. That client had to stay with that supplier for as long as he valued his data.
And so it's all So it's also that the user can say, "Oh, you've got my data. Can you please show me the data that you've got?
Show me it. Give me it. Delete it." Yeah, a whole ton of different rights.
Yeah, and that forget me, that's going to be the one that trips people up. If you say, "I want to unsubscribe," completely remove me, it's only going to take one accidental email that goes out to that person that's going to break, that rule.
Yeah, I mean, that was already in place anyway. That's part of the EU Data Directive, so that should have already been there. So the right to unsubscribe was always there. I think the difference with GDPR is people will pay more attention because prior to May 25th, the maximum fine you could have got for a breach was 500,000 euros. For example, but under the new legislation, the maximum fine is 20 million euros or percent of global turnover, which is the greater. So some of the regulations were already in place, but I think the belief is that with the new fines, people will pay more attention to them, and then others are brand new. But yeah, the right to be able to unsubscribe, to be forgotten, was always there. But again, interestingly, GDPR is not saying you have to scrap your computers. You just have to, in effect, delete, get rid of, wash. We're not saying that you have to employ this level of security that is hacker proof. Because that's not reasonable. You have to use reasonable steps to ensure that you've done this.
And so are the things, you spoke about it there, the 4% of annual turnover, global turnover, or 20 million euro as fines. is that the scare tactic that's causing a bit of the panic, and some of it is, just good data maintenance and clean up and take better care with the data that's internally, but it's sort of the big bat, so to speak, to get everyone in line?
It's not a scare tactic, it's a reality. I mean, the current maximum fine is 500,000. And we've had a number of businesses, not in the sports sector, but in the UK, who've been fined £480,000 or £450,000. So it's not a scare tactic per se, but I'm sure it grabs headlines where bigger headlines that are more memorable than 450k or 480k. So it's not a scare tactic. It is stuff that needs to be done. Having said that, there's a semblance of realization here. Your local data enforcement agency is not expecting you to go from non-compliant to compliant overnight, because this is a big undertaking. It's not just about your opt-ins. It's about your behind-the-scenes processes. It's about your job descriptions, your employee contracts. It goes a lot deeper than just your opt-ins. I was just sharing what's the most visible. What they will be looking to see is that you're taking things seriously, putting in place processes and demonstrating along the way that you are trying to become GDPR compliant within the time frame that's reasonable for your business, your role, the threats and the risks. There is an obligation put on the rights owner or the data controller to report breaches or any concerns, or where they haven't managed to be GDPR compliant yet. I'm interested to see how that plays out, because that's another thing, Sean. There's a lot of grey. In the GDPR, the biggest one for me is legacy data. How do we treat legacy data? There's a lot of grey in there, and we're going to have to wait for case law. We're going to have to wait for people to be sued, in effect, or taken to court until we find out what actually all of this means. And, of course, you don't want to be one of those ones that's held up as case law. So you want to do as much as you can that's reasonable, that's not scaremongering, that really genuinely supports the data subject, until we learn more about what actually this means. But yeah, legacy data is my biggest one. What about people that have been in my database for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, who've consistently engaged with me, but now I want to profile that data because I've never done profiling before, or I want to remarket to them, never done remarketing or retargeting before, never did, never could. Now I want to do it. Have I got to go back and ask them to opt in for the different uses? And you ring your local regulators hotline, they can't give you an answer, which means, by the way, your local lawyer can't give you an answer either. So, there's too much grey in there. A lawyer's answer would be, yes, go back and get them all to re-opt in, but nothing in the GDPR tells you need to do that. And I don't know if you've seen Man United's exercise, what they've gone through, or what they're still going through. They're literally going out to their whole database and asking them to re-opt in. I opted in to Man United. I know how I did it. I know when I did it. And I know it was a clear and express opt-in. They didn't need to come back and ask me to do it again. Well, I'm not going to do it.
It is a fail-safe, but there's every chance that you have your list, or worse.
Oh, well, whatever their database size is, I don't know what sort of engagement levels they'd get. Probably pretty high, or like most rights owners, high for certain people, low for others. But you're working on normal open rate and click-through rate. So their listed size is going to diminish. Not only that, they're going to have to ask themselves the question, if somebody was sent the campaign and opened it, or was sent the campaign and didn't open it, do we just take that as an unsubscribe then?
Effectively, you sort of have to. It's sort of it's a bit of a cleaning of the list. I guess the other thing that I wanted to ask is that the regulation has been brought in for the people in the EU, for individuals in the EU. So if you're operating business outside the EU but transacting data with EU citizens, then you've got to comply. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is to a degree. It depends what your definition of transacting is. So our interpretation is, and by the way, we're not lawyers, obviously. We just work with this all the time. Our interpretation is, if you are proactively targeting citizens in the EU, for example, the NFL sells their NFL pass to citizens in the EU. If you're providing EU language websites, for example, if you're presenting products and services with the EU currency, for example, you're proactively targeting citizens in the EU. If you happen to have people in your database, people coming to your website, people who are doing things with you who are from the EU in your database. Our interpretation is you're not expected to be GDPR compliant. It's if you are proactively pursuing that business. But here's an interesting thought. A lot of people believe that what we're doing here in the EU is the way of things to come. You know, Canada, you've just mentioned Australia itself tightening things up. Canada went through a major revision a couple of years ago. So there's another school of thought. Listen, if it's coming anyway,
it's just good
why
data
not
practice.
why don't you start tightening things up anyway? But yeah, if you're an international organisation and you are proactively working with citizens of the EU, you have to. If you're an international organisation and by coincidence you've got some people who've ended up in there, then we don't believe it's a legal requirement.
So yeah, I do think
it may be.
I do think what you were saying there is, professional sports organisations that are, growing their reach, and the NFLs and the NBAs and that of the world that have got strong presence and market into those spaces, they have to take in consideration. I guess the use cases I was thinking of were the really big players, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, the Twitters, and the data they're collecting in that.
It's always been a massive issue for them anyway, and there's always been regionalisation that they've had to deal with. I think it was about 4 years ago there used to be a natural act that allowed European-based organisations who have headquarters in the US to transfer their data over to US based on an existing agreement. I can't remember the name of it now, but that's gone now. Safe Harbour, that's it, the Safe Harbour Agreement. That went about 3 or 4 years ago. So we already saw a tightening up of implications for organisations like Facebook, Google, et cetera. So yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, they are too big. They are proactively focusing on the EU, so they absolutely need to be GDPR compliant. What that actually means when it comes to, because obviously they're naturally working with regions and territories, whether projects, products, or opportunities that are ring-fenced and can only be accessed by the US, that they set up the relevant firewalls, etc. I'm sure they don't apply GDPR there. Or they might just say, let's just be consistent. Let's have it across the world because that way it's easier. We know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's something that they've got to, when I'm thinking of all the data and, we play in that space a lot in, the data that Facebook has and that Google has, that Amazon is collecting all the time around our buying habits and our voice habits when we're using things like Alexa. Like they're all data beasts. So it's,
I'll tell you an interesting one for me on Facebook, and I'm interested to see how this plays out. I read a piece so when your fans, your followers are on Facebook, they're not your customers, they're Facebook's, clearly.
Correct.
And so it's Facebook's responsibility to ensure that the data protection act, the GDPR, or whatever your local regulation is in play, okay? But I read somewhere that Facebook's actually now putting the onus on their clients, the channel users, to make sure compliance is in place before they retarget them. So in other words, I've got a channel, I've got a list, I can't just use the fact.
Yeah, so it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B. So I would say, the Facebook fan bases that you've collected, so whether they be fans of Sports Geek or fans of the Dallas Cowboys, like I would say that they're in Facebook's wheelhouse and they're doing the protecting. But if I take a list that I've built, my email list, and then I load it into Facebook, Facebook's pretty clear in saying, hang on, you're saying that you've got this list appropriately.
If you're loading a list, without doubt, if you're loading a list, and that's what I mentioned to earlier, that's retargeting. And as you know, we probably never asked that list for an opt-in, did we? Because we gathered that list through the purpose of sending them a newsletter.
Yep.
We never expressly said, can I retarget you? So that was my earlier point. I don't know how GDPR is going to view legacy data.
Yep.
But I'm sure the piece I read about Facebook wasn't just about the list, because you're right, with list retargeting, it actually has to be opted in. But even using your own channel to target adverts to, which again, I can't see how that can be the case because they've come via Facebook, they've not come via you.
And then there's this is where you're anonymized. Oh yeah, I said it correctly. There's the anonymized data of like cookies and things like that aren't potentially tied to a data record, but we know that you've either visited the website or gone to an app that that form in that part of the piece. It's like I said, it's
that's a massive part of GDPR. It's a massive part of. I mean, cookies have always been. You've always had to tell people that you're using cookies for X, Y, and Z. But what's changing there is it's now going to have to be an express opt-in as opposed to an implied opt-in. I'll carry on using my website if you agree to my cookie policy.
Yep.
That's easy, isn't it?
Yep.
But if all of a sudden everybody's got to say, well, I've even heard stricter definitions. In fact, I think Google put this one out recently, the one where you can actually select advertisers that are allowed to retarget you. So you now have to consider, do you need to make your cookie policy expressly relevant if you allow your website to be used as a retargeting base? If I come to the Dallas Cowboys website and as I leave it, their sponsors advertising follows me around the world or around the web, some interpretation is that you have to expressly be able to give each individual advertiser the right to do that for you. But it's just staggering how that would play out. But
so it's going to be interesting.
The other day that Google's bringing it in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if the lawyers can keep up with the advertisers. I think that's the race that currently is happening.
I think that the thing that gives me comfort is these behemoths of data organizations, whether it's Facebook or Google or Amazon, these are the guys who lobby to ensure that whilst the rights of the individuals are protected, they also are able to serve their customers and therefore make money, have a sustainable business. So what gives me comfort is these guys will be doing it properly. These guys are leading the way. So what I'm doing with my clients, I'm just watching what's happening with the other guys.
Yep.
That these guys are making sure that whilst the rules are valid and to be in place, there's still enough opportunity for business. Otherwise, they wouldn't have one.
Yeah, exactly.
So that gives me comfort. Yeah, it's not about the FA. It's not about whatever else. It's about these big giants.
So that's interesting. It has. Hopefully, it is. I'll send it to the people I was chatting to in Europe. Hopefully, it calms them a little bit. But hopefully, it's a matter of common sense prevails. But we'll move away from the GDPR.
Can I just say one more thing? Can I just say one more thing? Rights owners need to be looking at this as an opportunity, not to re-cleanse their list, because we don't agree with that unless there's a specific need, but to tighten up their processes and present themselves as responsible organisations. Can you imagine how much more valuable it might be to a sponsor, to someone like a telecommunications partner or financial services organisation, if you can demonstrate to them that you're playing by the right rules, that their customer data is as safe as your customer data. So we want to encourage people to see it as an opportunity. One final thing as well. Here's my piece of advice for the rights owners. Go back to all your supplier agreements. And by the way, Sean, that includes yours.
Yep.
If you're servicing anyone over here, my advice to our clients, to rights owners, is go back to all your supply agreements and get some data clauses in there. Because under the GDPR, both the controller and the processor are deemed liable. Case in point, you're doing work for Arsenal, for example.
Yep.
If you do a piece of work for Arsenal and you breach the terms, if you haven't done it correctly, under previous EU, only Arsenal was responsible. Under new legislation, you and Arsenal are responsible.
Yep.
So, of course, there needs to be something referring to that in the contract. Conversely, Sean, you give advice to Arsenal, they don't follow the advice, and ICO sees you both responsible. Well, then surely Arsenal need to be paying your share of the fine, because you gave the right advice. So certainly with all our clients, we're readdressing all the supply agreements. We're also making sure we carry the burden for them in terms of the data flow and the processes that we're involved in. So again, advice to rights owners: get your suppliers to carry a lot of the work for you. Get them to document the processes. Get them to document the data flows, and make sure you've got the correct terms and conditions in your supply agreements.
So it does lead on to the next thing, because it does, on how vital data is becoming with sponsorship. Because it's not a matter of, hey, we ran a competition, here's some data, and we're sending it to our sponsors. Obviously, you're cleaning up everything from the GDPR, but just overall, sponsors are becoming far more data savvy in understanding, I guess, the opportunities that sports rights holders have and the access that they have to fans. How are you seeing that evolve over the past couple of years?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So it's no longer just about give me your email marketing list,
Yep.
give your email marketing list to a sponsor, which we would never have advocated anyway. And it's gone beyond just, put my message in an email campaign. I mean, we're talking back to the cookie policy and digital channels and allowing sponsors to put their cookies on your website so they can retarget or remarket to your fans. So again, that's a massive, massive discussion area. And I know on behalf of Winners, the side of that discussion that we come down on, which is, your sponsors are associating with you because of the value your IP brings.
Yep.
Do not give them your data. Do not give them access to your data.
Completely.
Carry the message.
Yep.
Yeah, carry the messaging on their behalf. But no, I mean, it's having a great impact, but on a positive side. And the good thing about it is it doesn't matter about your scale. It doesn't matter about your size. Because even if you aren't doing anything now, but you've written a strategy or your plan in place, share that with a potential sponsor. They can see that you seriously. We actually had a really good experience with one of our clients, UEFA, a couple of months ago, and they find a fantastic deal, Booking.com. Now, Booking.com is a pure play online,
Yep.
so you can imagine how important data is to them without a shadow of a doubt. And UEFA said, if it hadn't been for the fact that we've been working with our data for 3 years, of course supported by Winners, we would never have signed this deal.
Fiona, you mentioned there that you've worked with UEFA for 3 years and it really set them up for this Booking.com deal. What do they know now that they didn't know 3 years ago, and what were some of the steps they had to go through?
So I think the biggest thing for them, as it is for any rights holder or indeed any business moving into this space, it was the creation of their single customer view. It was being able to look holistically at all their fans across the world and the types of relationships that they have with them. And it can be a challenge for organisations to pull that together. I mean, UEFA were in a position where they already had a lot of processes in place. You could register on the UEFA.com website 5-10 years ago.
Yep.
But the opportunity that they brought into play over the last 3 years was getting more of a structure and a strategy around how that data is being used and, more importantly, where it's being placed. So having that single customer view, that one centralised database, enabled them to answer the questions and to propose the solutions to Booking.com that were part of the contract negotiations. And, of course, now they will continue to build on that and move forward. And, they'll go from a single customer view to a data management platform to a client data platform, et cetera, and keep evolving.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we talked about.
One thing.
That's what we talked about last time around, that it's not a matter of coming in, turning the keys, opening a box and pressing go. It is about getting all those building blocks to get to that point. So this for UEFA was getting that single customer view and getting all the insights out of it. And then now that they're there, they can continue and get more sophisticated on their journey.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, everything, it's all about the journey and the quick wins along the way. So even though it's, it might have been 3 years to end up with the Booking.com discussion, there were many quick wins along the way. You are constantly evolving. The minute you say, right, okay, I'm going to start with an actual CRM or data strategy, it isn't a case of, and in 12 months' time I will have. It's more a case of continue to evolve, continue to improve, delivering quick wins, which you have to do
Yep.
to keep people engaged, to justify budget, for example. It was an evolving process. But that's ultimately what they meant when they said, if we hadn't been working with our data for 3 years, that was the key piece. It was the insights and the analytics that came out of that centralized data warehouse or a single customer view.
So one thing I did want to ask you about, and we were talking about it in the pre-interview, is about the book you're working on.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Sean. I haven't said this anywhere in the public domain. I've mentioned it to a couple of people, and of course I've got case studies and a forward that has been very generously provided by Paul Greenberg. But yes, I've been working on a book, and it's going to be in the streets.
So what's the book about? Who is it for?
Yeah.
And have you found the process?
It's about the role of CRM, business intelligence and data analytics in the sports industry. Lots of books already out there on sports performance and data, and a couple of really good books about data for the business side of sport.
Yep.
But we're taking it a step further and going just beyond the data, because it's not just about the data, as important as it is. We work to 5 key elements, which are strategy, data, technology, process and culture. So it's taking all those into account, because business change is perhaps we talk about all 5 elements being as important as each other, but in reality, business change, that's a doozy.
Yep.
You've really got to get your cultural change, your mindset change, and you'll see that in your work anyway with digital,
yep.
Getting people to move from a linear to a digital thought process. Exactly the same with data. So that was the purpose of the book, to bring it all together and ensure that when people want to understand how do I actually do this, it's not just about get some data and get the software, because that can, that's where things go wrong when you lead with an IT solution as opposed to all the other things. But I guess the primary reason for doing it is when I entered this space about 7 years ago, I would have asked some daft questions. I mean, I always say to anybody I meet now, there's no such thing as a daft question. Any question is up for grabs. But I just am hoping that with the way I've approached this book, it will help answer some of those questions straight away, straight off the bat. So it's a helicopter view. I would say it's entry level, but at the same time, it's for people who are entry level to the subject matter, not necessarily entry level to marketing or digital marketing or business.
Yep.
It's targeted at students, of course. I love to help students learn more about this area, but it's also targeted at people who are currently playing somewhat in the industry per se. Yeah, or maybe somebody who's working in a rights owner knows that they need to start thinking about this and wants to think about where they start. I think for intermediates, I'm hoping they'll get something out of it. For advanced practitioners, I'm hoping they might just enjoy the case studies and the anecdotes. But it is targeted more entry level, helicopter view, but intermediates should get something from it as well.
But the good thing about it is that because data is becoming, in the same way that I guess I'm coming from a digital point of view, it's becoming so pervasive across business. More people need to be across it, but they're not going to specialise in it. But they need to know what are the concepts around it. Why is this technology important? Why are we doing this? Even if they're not the practitioner. So
100%. You're the CEO, the CMO, the COO, whatever. You need to have working for you the data analysts. You need to have the digital marketing campaigners. You need to have legal taking care of your obligations. You've got to have IT making sure the platforms talk to each other. So it's that helicopter view of what do I need to know to ensure that I'm running this team or managing this team who are actually making it happen. So that's what I mean about it's not just for students, for example. It could also be for people running businesses or operating at a senior level who just need to understand enough to ensure that it's part of their strategy, but then they hire the right people to actually be on the ground and operationally deliver. I mean, the one I'm hoping it will direct people into other areas as well, where they need to be reading further or where they need to be, exploring and investigating further. So providing the signpost and helping people understand which way to go from there.
How have you enjoyed the process? Have you got a typewriter out? Have you been punching them out in long form, or how's the process been?
It's been really interesting, and I thank all those people around me who've been incredibly supportive, contributing some amazing case studies or some really, really interesting case studies. A team in the office, my family, the proofreaders I've had, the army of proofreaders I've had on this. What I will say is if anybody else is out there thinking about writing a book or starting writing a book and they want some help, guidance, anecdotes, nuggets of, experience and knowledge, be happy to share it. Thoroughly enjoyed the process. It's not finished, by the way, until this coming Friday. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's been tough. I've made mistakes along the way. I'd love to be able to pass that learning on. Hey, maybe my next book will be how to write a book.
Yeah, well, it says you've got the bug when you're finishing off your first book and you're saying my next book as someone who's
That's the first time I've ever used that term.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's, I'm in the process of doing the same for myself. I'm at the starting line, I feel, and starting to put the material together. But knowing a few authors, you definitely sound like an author. So I'm looking forward to the book. I'm looking forward to you to sending me an email and saying we've locked in Have you got a title for the book yet?
No, that's an interesting point. My colleague in the office, Callum McGregor, came up with what I thought was a fantastic title. How to win when you're not winning. The principle being, you're winning the championships and it's like Christmas. You don't need help selling sponsorships or shirts or tickets.
Yep.
And so, of course, the underlying principle was it's when you're not winning that you need to have these strategies in place. The publisher's not that keen on the title, so they're going to come up with one. So I don't have it yet, but we'll be putting it out there in digital media when we do. Do you have a title for yours?
It's still a work in progress. I think I do. It's not ready for public consumption just yet. I'm still putting it through
I look forward to hearing it.
It's still going through my focus groups, is the way I'm putting it. So if you need focus group help for yours, please send me a message. So I want to finish up this. I know you've got a meeting to get to. The Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I do indeed. It was Lincoln City versus Tottenham Hotspur at Sincil Bank. And the reason I remember it, I was 14 years old. Angela Borman took me and I saw Glenn Hoddle's thighs.
Okay. Well, I hopefully, have you still got it? I don't think I want to put that into Google, but I'll leave that, Glenn Hoddle's thighs. Okay. You've gone to many sports events, both in Europe and then in the US. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food when you go to a sports event?
I do have a go-to food. It's a straightforward pucker pie. I can't do without a pucker pie. But my favourite food memory was at Seat a couple of years ago. And we went around one of the stadiums and I saw a sign saying vegan hot dogs available here. I just thought only in America.
But you didn't have one.
I didn't have one. I'm not a vegan.
They're just,
but it was just the fact that they cater,
I guess,
to such a niche level for their fans was incredible. Incredible.
Yep. He probably didn't sell any. Apologies to all my vegan listeners. The first app you open in the morning?
Twitter.
Twitter. Do you have some? Who do you think? Who could you suggest that the podcast listeners should follow that you look up to, and why?
I really love a marketing expert called Mark Ritson who writes on Marketing Week. He covers the whole breadth of marketing, digital, data, offline, etc.
Yep.
What I love about Mark is he's not afraid to call a spade a spade. He even calls the F word on numerous occasions. Highly entertaining, very informative, really good read. Mark Ritson.
Yeah, I think I shared his post on the Leeds United badge logo bundle.
It was great, wasn't it?
Which was a really good take. Lastly, what social media platform is your MVP?
My MVP is, again, Twitter, not just for the business, but also for me personally. I love that soundbite, quick review of what's going on. The moments, I find the moments invaluable.
Well, thank you very much for coming back on the podcast and clearing up the confusion around the GDPR and telling us a little bit about successes you've had with UEFA. Where can people find you on the internet if they wanted to connect with you?
So Fiona Green 66 is the Twitter handle. We also run the largest sports CRM and BI group on LinkedIn. So just look for sports CRM and BI. Our website address is winnersfdd.com.
All right. Well, I'll have all those links as well as links to Fiona on LinkedIn, where she'll be starting to share out little snippets and little teasers for her book that will be coming out. And if you're in the CRM space, it will be one to look out for. If Paul Greenberg's written the forward, you've already got me as a buyer of the book. So thank you very much for coming on, and I will see you at the next conference.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you, and thank you for your time this morning. Cheers.
Want to start driving more revenue from digital? Go to sportsgeekcampaigns.com.
Thanks again to Fiona Green. Send her a tweet at Fiona Green 66. Tell her that you listen to the podcast and tell her that you're looking forward to her book. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to finding out, workshopping the title and finding out what the title is, Fiona. Best of luck. I will be following your lead. You're a little bit in front of me in writing and getting the book done. But I really do look forward to reading it. And as we sort of discussed, even if you're not in the data space and you're not working with your CRM, if you're in the digital or the sponsorship space or the tech space, it'll be a really valuable read because you want to be understanding the impact that data will have to your business. And so listening and reading people like Fiona Green and, as she mentioned, Paul Greenberg, reading what they're writing is something that you sort of must do to have a well-rounded view of the world of sports. Couple of things to finish off. Sort of going through athlete training season at the minute. Recently did a training session with the Australian women's football team known as the Matildas, talking to them around best practice around digital and athletes. And I really do think the platforms are changing and the opportunities are changing for athletes, especially with the rise of different media outlets that are athlete-based. I think you were seeing athletes go through the same phases that sports teams did when they first got on social, where they are developing themselves as brands in their own right and media entities in their own right. So it's always good to give a refresher to a playing group and a coaching group, which is just as important because they want to know what their players are doing. So we sort of, what the process is we sort of go through what the latest platforms are doing and how that affects an athlete, and then also talk about different tools and methods they can do to better appeal to both fans from a fan engagement point of view, but then also how they can be better property for a sponsor. So it's always a good discussion. It's always good to hear it from the athlete's point of view. How are they dealing with things like trolls? How are they interacting with brands? What are brands asking them to do on social? And so, yeah, depending on the type of group, it sort of works out quite well because it's part lecture and then it ends up in a bit of Q&A territory, and we sort of start setting things like social media policies for athletes and making them team-led. There's nothing better. I tell the story of a team talking to them about privacy and security and protecting themselves, and they mentioned that they were using WhatsApp as a group chat amongst the players, which is fine. But then I was quick to mention what kind of content was in that group chat, and there was a few glancing looks around the room, knowing that some of that content might have been maybe a little bit suspect. And then I said, so who in the room is always losing their phone? And there was one or two people that were pointed at. And I said, so what if someone picks up that phone and sees the content that's on that group chat? And you should have seen the blood run from their face. And I think the captain of the team at the time pretty much stood up and said, "Okay, guys, we're now deleting that chat." So it sort of gave them a bit of understanding of, I guess, some of the impacts, and let them set some of the rules. And I think in a player-led leadership group, that kind of thing, if they're setting the rules, it's much easier for management and coaching staff to not have to be saying, do this, don't do this, if the players themselves are policing that. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you think your players and coaching group want a refresher in that space, please get in touch. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. As I said, I've booked up a couple of these type of sessions with different clubs, both at the national level, but then also at the pro level, to help them understand what they can do. That's pretty much it for me. Don't forget, you can now get the two Facebook guides, the one on understanding your data by going to sportsgeekhq/FB data, and the second one that's now available on Facebook campaigns, sportsgeekhq.com/FB campaigns. And so that pretty much goes through how we build out the audiences and targeting and understand the data that's available. And then the campaigns is how we build out the campaigns, the types of campaigns we use, how we build out the collateral, and all of those kind of things. So please check them out. As always, I'm available on all social channels, and I'm also available in the ever-growing Sports Biz Slack community. If you haven't joined up yet, or if you don't check in regularly, please do so and say hello. And I'll see you in there. Until next time, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join over 1,000 sports business executives in Sports Biz Slack. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack. Please share your fave episodes of Sports Geek on LinkedIn. Be sure to tag Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources. Want to chat with Sean? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.